long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, a great adventure took place.
Talking Bird, the special edition.
We're back!
Hey!
Hello, and welcome to Talking Bird. Talking Bird, the special edition.
That's right.
Yes, and what do we mean by special? We're not really talking about birds anymore because, except for the Millennium Falcon, I can't
The metal flying birds.
The metal flying birds. We are... I don't have a tagline for this thing except for the special. Now we're going to talk about Star Wars. How exciting.
We did it.
We did it.
We made a Star Wars podcast.
Yes, somebody was goading us on to do this. So
after all these years,
yes,
someone said, "Why aren't there two white guys talking about Star Wars on the internet?"
Exactly.
We did it, people. We did it.
It was either this or we were going to start playing. We were just going to start golfing.
Yeah.
So
you're welcome.
You're welcome. So, so it's been about a year, I think. I think our last show was in February. So
that sounds right-ish.
It's a new regime. We spent a year waiting to see if there was going to be Eagleheart season 4, and I'm pretty sure there's not, at least in the immediate future. So I think we're safe to rebrand.
I keep seeing articles that say like, oh, it's still up in the air, or for now it's on hold or delayed, and now it's more than likely over.
Yeah. Well, you never know. It's with Twin Peaks and Fuller House and Coach and what else has come back? Star Wars has come back after I thought there wasn't going to be any more Star Wars.
That's right.
That George Lucas had, I'm not going to do any more of these. I'm not really happy with the way people talk to me about it. Make fun of my movies. So I'm just like, he's
still a little sore about the way people talk about those movies.
Yes, indeed. I mean the prequels. I'm sorry, you cut out there.
Oh, the prequels, I said.
Oh, yes, the prequels. Yeah, so we just thought, something, I don't know. I guess a good thing would be to talk a little bit, just give a brief kind of history maybe with why we decided to do some Star Wars stuff after doing these other things. I guess me personally, I was like 4 years old when the first one came out, so I'm pretty much have been since the get-go. I mean, except for a small dalliance in my preschool years, being a big Land of the Lost fan, I was pretty much like, Star Wars all through grade school and, and that. And, like every other kid, I kind of got out of it. And then when the book started coming out, I got interested in it again. And then they announced the movies, and then I saw them, and then I wasn't so into them. But I still would go and see them. I don't want to talk about the prequels today. But
we'll get to that.
I definitely gave them a good, honest college try. And so by like 2005, I think was the last movie to come out, and then they did the Clone Wars. They did that Clone Wars movie, and I was like, I have all this memorabilia. I'm kind of I like to think I'm pretty balanced on this stuff, but thinking back, it's like I got all these toys and memorabilia and stuff. And then one day I was on an airplane, and they had that that movie, The Clone Wars, which is basically the pilot episode of the Clone Wars cartoon. And it's like, I was like, oh, what is this? So I go and I didn't even know it had come out. And I turned it off after half an hour. And that was like the first time I'd ever turned off anything Star Wars related in my, and I was like, I think I'm done with this. And then it was like years and years. And I'm like, yeah. And I got rid of like 90% of my Star Wars stuff, you know, giving them to kids and things like that. And then all of a sudden it's like they announced that Disney's taking it over. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. And then, J.J. Abrams, I'm like, yeah. And then I see the teaser, and all of a sudden I'm like, they hooked me again. After all this time, I'm interested. So that's where how I ended up here. How about you, John?
It's not too different of a story. I guess I would have been 1 when Return of the Jedi came out. So I never saw the original trilogy in the theaters. I have this vague memory. It's still kind of it's a vague memory, but it's still with me. I was probably 5 or 6 or something, and being at some distant relation's house, and they were watching what must have been A New Hope. But for like a year or two, I thought, okay, they were in the desert, and then they're in this ice planet. Like I had confused A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back in my head somehow. So anyway, I got a couple years older, and I rented the movies from the video store or whatever, and I loved them. And so that's when I started getting into, I guess, the books. That was sort of the second wave of books, right? So this would have been the early 90s, I guess. So after Splinter of the Mind's Eye and all of the 1970s attempts at the books.
They call them, was it Bantam or something? The Bantam was like the Zahn stuff and the
so that was around the time.
Yeah.
Right. So I started reading those, and I got into those. And I love the music, I love the art and the designs of them, and I started reading more about those, and I guess up until late high school, probably. And then, I moved away to college. I left all that stuff at home. I kind of got away from it for a while. I did see the prequels, which that's probably as much as I'll say. But then, I guess it was around the time that they announced Disney was getting more involved with it. I guess maybe right before that, I was starting to think about it more and be like, oh, maybe I should get back into it. Maybe I should sort of catch up with what's been happening. But yeah, around the time they announced that Disney was getting back into it, I was like, oh, well, that's sort of interesting. What's been going on with this, and what are they going to do? And then, I saw the trailers, and I started reading more about it. And, I was trying to put up a good front, but they hooked me, and I'm back in it.
Yeah, it's kind of...
So that's how I got here.
Exactly. It's kind of like, I have to admit, it can be a little bit embarrassing. It's like one of those things where all of a sudden you're like, yeah, it's like, whatever. It's like, I'm finally free of you. And then you're just like, yeah, I really need to see what's going to happen. And I'm even got...
Yeah.
And I think we should discuss this we probably should have done this before we started the actual recording, but it was like, what is our spoiler policy going to be? Because it's like, I'm like 30% spoiled, I think. And I don't really want to be much more spoiled, except I want, some people are very like weird about it. Like they're not even watching they're excited, but they won't even watch the trailers or the teasers. They're not trailers. I guess they're considered teasers.
Right. Teaser trailers. Yeah. I mean, I guess we were planning on, talking a little bit about those, but we'll get to this in a minute. But I don't really think we're going to spoil much by talking about teaser trailers and what happened at Celebration.
Right.
But yeah, going forward, I guess we're probably just going to talk about what's publicly, officially out there, and not talk about all of these, spoiler articles that get written about, someone found the shooting script behind a file cabinet, and then they FedExed it out to some guy in Florida who's writing about it under cover of anonymity. Like we're not going to go hunting for that stuff because I want to go into this fresh. I want to make sure that I'm not. So part of the reason that I initially tried to avoid the trailers and everything is because I wanted to go in with like zero expectations, because that was sort of an issue with the prequels, I think, for a lot of people. And so, I thought with the newer films, the Disney era, going in with very minimal expectations, I think that can only be a good thing. But it's hard, and I wouldn't say that I'm like embarrassed about it, except that I hate feeling like I'm being marketed to.
Yes.
And that's exactly what all of this is.
Yeah,
right?
it's kind of yeah, it's like that thing where you're like, wow, they found that little spot in the back of my head that, they can just tap it and all of a sudden I give right in.
Right. It's like, oh, they knew exactly what button to push.
Right.
And of course they do. Like they have all kinds of market research departments and years of experience learning how to do exactly that. And when it gets you, it's like, oh, come on. I thought I was better than that.
Yeah, it's really hard to be like, you spend all this time saying, well, they don't market, commercials aren't really about me. I don't have to pay attention to them. I can TiVo past them. But then when marketing gets at you right in that part of you, that's, the 8-year-old kid of you, it's kind of shocking. I'm kind of surprised. I honestly said to myself, oh yeah, they're doing them. Oh, I'm just going to read up. I'll just read all the spoilers and stuff. And it's amazing how quickly I got myself out of it, because I had read some, I know that there's supposedly 2 stories floating around. There's they gave George Lucas his $4.2 billion.
Right.
And I think for that they get the whole kit and caboodle, and the stories and all this stuff. And I guess as part of the extra stuff, they got a treatment for episode 7, and I guess they didn't like it, and so they're not using it. And I think that's kind of, at least that's what they're saying. Who knows? Maybe George Lucas has a, I just finished 2 like similar books about the kind of like the fandom. One was called the Secret History of Star Wars, which is kind of it was like one of those things where it started out as an ebook and it was free for years, and then somebody published it. So it's super long, but it's a lot of interesting stuff, but it's also like a lot of really repetitive. It's like a lot of, this guy has a thesis about how George Lucas wasn't his initial intent of the first movie to where he ended up with his 6th movie. It was completely different. He never had a plan, and he kind of goes line by line and points it out in interviews. And so it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But there was the secret history, not the secret history. The other one was called How Star Wars Conquered the Galaxy, which you can look them up. I don't know. That one is a better overall if a person just wanted, like, I just want something kind of concise, but it kind of talks a little bit about where he was in his mindset, about how he had basically, he'd figured out that, like, oh, nobody, even though I have this cartoon that kids watch, it's like my little dynasty or whatever is kind of dying because we have nothing new. So either I have to make 3 new movies, or I have to, resign myself to the fact that Star Wars is going to die. It's going to die off. And I think he started it and realized, like, he just turned 70. And he's like, and he still works at that kind of glacial pace that, he worked at in the 70s, the same way the prequels, where it's like the prequels, each one of them took 3 whole years to make. Whereas I think Disney, how long has this movie been in production? Has it even been a year?
Yeah.
Or something like that. It'll be
well, and Rogue One, I think, is supposed to come out 2016. Is that right?
Yeah, and they haven't even. Or
17. They haven't even started filming
it's
yet.
Literally coming out like, is it Christmas? Is that like the new thing?
No, I think it's like, I want to say it's like May. It might be May 2017 even, but even so, like that's.
I honestly think it's
pretty quick.
I think it's coming out. That the whole plan is they got something coming out every year till like 2020.
Yeah.
Which is kind of freaky when you realize that they have like 1 cast member, and they had a, I guess, if I watched most of that, I watched most of the celebration this was it 2 weeks ago? Yeah, 2 weeks ago they had it streaming on YouTube, which was nice because for because for like a brief moment, I thought to myself, I have friends in Los Angeles. I love Los Angeles. Like, why don't I just like why don't I just like go crazy and take my, tax return money and buy a ticket, and me and the wife will go down there and we'll just do it. Because actually to get in, it was like really for 4 days, it was like $140, which is not that bad. I mean, that's how much it costs to go to like a regular Comic-Con. And that being said, right. I can't even bring myself
to Disney World.
Well, I can't even bring myself to go out to the Comic-Con, local Comic-Con. So obviously that idea didn't stick. Right. I started thinking about the crowds, and I kept thinking about the way, like, oh, it's so great to be around other Star Wars fans. And I'm like, I don't know. I have a very definite way of viewing Star Wars, and I find a lot of times it's kind of like, I mean, I'm not criticizing people, but I'm just pointing out it's like some people are very like unable to have perspective. It's like I'm a big fan, but I'm also like the first one to say like, oh, why do they do this stuff about things?
Yeah.
Like I said, people are like immediately, oh, J.J. Abrams. And I was just until I saw that teaser, I was pretty much pretty grossed out about the idea. Because, I mean, I liked Star Trek, his Star Trek, but the second one was it's as bad. If you haven't seen it, it's as bad as people say it is. It just doesn't make any sense.
I have not. I saw the first one, and I liked it okay, but then like a week later, I could barely remember what happened in it, and I was like, oh, I guess I didn't like that movie as much as I thought I did.
Yeah, and see, that's what I'm a little bit worried about. These, like, there's like a lot of exciting stuff. I'm worried it's like, is this going to be one of these Star Wars movies where it's like, you're going to watch it and you're going to just be like so excited, and then when you go out, it's going to feel like this kind of hollow experience. But
right.
I think
they made another movie to get us to next year when there's another movie.
Yeah. Which is going to be
than something that's, going to last.
Yeah, I mean, they've already so they got, well, I guess it's called The Force Awakens, which what do you think of that title? Does it feel George?
I think it's fine.
I
think it fits in with, Return of the Jedi or whatever.
See, I feel like it doesn't feel very George Lucas-y. Which, maybe that's the point of it. Maybe they feel like they have to slowly transition out of his. They can't just like try to replicate his style forever. Because I mean, people have tried that before. I mean, Superman Returns, the Bryan Singer sequel to Superman 2. That was like, all he talked about was like, oh, it's so. I watched. There's like a 2-hour documentary on the DVD of that, and it's all about how they studied the original Richard Donner movies and like got everything right. And it's like they did it too much, and the story itself has so little movement that I think that's why it failed. And of course then they tried to go radical with the Man of Steel, and people were really unhappy with that. So I think it's hopefully it looks like that Disney is finding a nice balance with some of that teaser stuff. I mean, I think the first teaser though, it was almost a little disorientating because it was like, okay, well, here's things that like desert planets, and here's stormtroopers, and here's droids and stuff, but it's not. They're not. None of them look like what you remembered. It's like later we find out. Well, I mean, some people theorize that this might be one of JJ's mystery box things with the idea in the second teaser, and the announcement that the planet is not Tatooine, it's Jakku.
Jakku. Yeah, that was announced.
But some people have already theorized that, like, oh, well, Jakku, they're just saying that, but really it's going to be Tatooine. It's just a different part of the planet or something like that.
Yeah. No, I think it's not Tatooine. Now, that doesn't mean that Tatooine isn't in the movie.
Right.
But, yeah, so to go back real quick, I mean, you mentioned we were both sort of watching Celebration online because neither one of us are in Anaheim. Yeah. And for me, it was again, sort of getting back into it, reading up. I was like, oh, I'm not going to watch this. I'm just going to wait and find out what happens afterwards. And then like the day before I realized like, well, I don't really have anything to do in the morning. right? Like I don't have to go to work yet while this thing starts. I guess I can watch it. And so, right, it's again getting back into it. But yeah, so we were both sort of watching this online and talking about it on Twitter and stuff. And so the show is basically our friends peer pressuring us into doing the show. Our friends basically saw that and were like, you all should do a show.
Yeah,
like,
because
just do it.
I was complaining about a podcast that I actually think is if there are other podcasts out there that are done more professionally by like, fans who aren't particularly critical about Star Wars. So if you just like nothing but positivity, you might like that better. But I was complaining about something that happened, and then somebody was kind of goading us into doing this, which I was so funny because I saw you had sent me a message because we're a part of a secret message board that you can't be a part of. But we're still. But I got this thing and I didn't see it for 2 days, and I had just seen something, and I go, I really wonder why John hasn't asked us if we should do a Star Wars podcast. And I literally got up the next morning and looked at the message board, and I saw that thing, and I'm like, "Jeez, that's so hilarious." It's like in some ways it doesn't make sense for us to do this because I'm not super rah about Star Wars all the time.
Yeah,
but it's kind of like, I think our significant others are really probably tired of hearing us talk about it. So,
well, and I mean, I think maybe that there is a reason, there is room for another podcast that isn't all rah or even essentially another marketing arm that's going to cover the latest toy releases or video games or whatever. Right, we obviously like Star Wars a lot. Otherwise, there's no reason for us to do a podcast about it.
Exactly.
But we're also not going to praise everything or talk about how, isn't this so exciting? And it gets your blood pumping. I mean, you heard we've already been doing that with the trailers, but
my Masterworks replica figures of what is the Kylo Ren. I will say this. Yeah. Okay, so what do you think about the name? So we know that we don't even know what he is, but the bad guy, quote, bad guy, is supposedly named Kylo Ren and may or may not be Adam Driver from Girls, which is a strange thought.
I mean, there was a period of time. It was way after the 2012 election. So this was like last year, where I had a serious thought about making a quiz about a Star Wars character or member of the Romney family, right? Because just like how you have like Mitt Romney or Tag Romney or Bulk Romney or Shiv Romney or Nirmal Romney, right? Now we have like Kylo Ren. Which is like I guess it's fine as a name, right? It's certainly not the most bizarre or ridiculous name in the Star Wars universe. I guess the Star Wars Legends now universe. It's fine.
There's Kylo Ren and Poe Dameron, who's the name of the supposedly
that name I don't care for.
Oscar Isaac's character. Finn, that's John Boyega's character. That's perfectly good name there. And then there's Rey.
Well, we say that, but we don't know what his last name is or his first name. If Finn is his last name. Wait,
no, Rey is the girl.
Yeah, that's
the one.
Is it Daisy?
Daisy Ridley.
I can't think of the actress's
Daisy Ridley.
name.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, John Boyega. So actually thinking about John Boyega, I think that was what kind of sold me seeing him. It was kind of like when he popped up out of that thing, I thought, this is going to be kind of different.
In the first teaser?
In the first teaser. It's like, I know it seems like, oh, it's so great. But it really did feel like, wow, they're not gonna just regurgitate the original trilogy back to you. They're gonna, because people are like, oh, it's got to be like the original. We got to use all practical effects and stuff. But just this idea of like, they don't have those. I was watching some of the original trailers. And there wasn't a lot of mystery in the prequel trailers, especially. It's like, if you watch it, it actually is pretty much they show you the plot of the movie.
Yeah.
in kind of chopped up.
They may have needed to.
Yeah, they might have
So that
to
you
actually
would
get
know
you
what
to do it.
happens going in.
But this whole idea of a dude just popping out and half undressed in a stormtrooper thing, it just like it just kind of sets off the brain. Like, what is this? Is this a good guy? Is this a bad guy? I think that, and then like the Millennium Falcon thing at the end, of course, is like that's obviously kind of a little bit, pandering to people. Are like, if they didn't have at least one original trilogy thing, people would be flipping
tugging
out.
at the heartstrings.
Yeah. And it's like, I honestly, I was excited, but I would say that seeing the second one, it did. That really did get me in the back of the, that button in the back of my head.
Oh yeah.
It was kind of like, people were saying I was crying.
Yeah, I know. So
I wasn't crying, but I definitely got the hairs on my arms, kind of thing. Like, ugh, this is weird.
Yeah.
But.
No, it's because I went back and watched both of them again right before the show, and except for there are a couple shots in the second teaser trailer that are from different scenes, but probably I don't know, half of the second teaser trailer is essentially the same content as the first trailer, but just from different camera angles, right? So you still have the X-wings like flying over the water, and you saw the John Boyega popping up in his Stormtrooper uniform, and you still have the Millennium Falcon being chased by TIE fighters and whatever. So there are a lot of similarities in what you actually see. So it's not like the second teaser trailer is like showing you a lot more. But there was just something about the way it was edited together, or even just like the different camera angles of seeing the X-wings like flying over the water and the big swoosh of water coming up. Yeah, it does sort of. It was less. It gets you energized.
It felt less mysterious and more like, this like the first one is like total mystery. I'm confused. The other thing was like, well, this is what you remember. At least this is what we think you remember. But I will say the one thing I was before we get away from it, the Kylo Ren thing. When I heard that name, I was like, did they say Kybo Ren? And I was like, embarrassingly enough, I know the name Kybo Ren, which is really similar, is from like the Droids cartoon in the 80s. They had like this,
oh really?
Yeah, they had this. You can look it up on the internet, but they have. It's like he was like this fat dude wearing like a weird World War I German helmet, and he had a Fu Manchu mustache. And it's because it's like, Lucas always had like this weird thing before the prequels that he didn't, any expanded universe stuff, he didn't really want to talk about the Empire. So anytime that they would do like, the original Han Solo books from the 70s, they never fought the Empire. It was always something called like,
it was like the corporate sector.
Yeah, the corporate sector. And the Lando ones, I think, are kind of similar like that.
Yeah.
And the cartoons kind of fell under that too. So I don't remember. I have a VHS of it around here somewhere, but it was just like, really? Do they not know that they already have a character?
Oh, I'm sure they know. But I mean, it is interesting. You were saying that you were talking earlier about how they're sort of moving away from the Lucas styles, and we'll cover sort of various aspects of that. But I do think, at least with this film, it seems to me like they are trying to bridge sort of what Lucas did and what the way he approached these things, even in like naming them or stylistic, and then trying to bridge that to whatever Disney wants to do in the future, handing it off to multiple different directors and not necessarily having like an in-house style. I mean, what made me think of that is if you listen to the music in both of the teaser trailers, right? So the first teaser trailer, you have the sort of stings or the like bum, 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 going on, and that's sort of evoking Return of the Jedi,
right?
When Luke is on Jabba's sail barge, and it's right before he's supposed to be, as he's walking the plank. And it's not quite the same because in this trailer there's some music underneath it, but it's still sort of evoking that moment of suspense of, what's going to happen? Is this the end of the Jedi? Or and then, oh no, look, they're back. Here's the Millennium Falcon, and here are the X-wings, and And then in the second teaser trailer, there are sort of two big musical moments that it keys into. The first is with the French horn in the beginning is what's called the binary sunset theme from A New Hope, which is this really sort of iconic moment from that movie where Luke is on his moisture farm and he's contemplating his future and he's unhappy where he is and he sees, the twin suns setting. And that's right. It's like an iconic moment in the film and also musically. And then at the end, towards the end of the second trailer, there's this brass figure that basically comes from Empire Strikes Back when the Yoda is lifting the X-Wing out of the swamp.
Oh.
And again, there's some different music underneath it in the second trailer, but it's really clear. Even if I had to spend some time figuring out where I heard that figure before, but even if you don't immediately recognize it, they're clearly like trying to trigger the whatever sense memory you have of these really like exciting moments, and two of probably some of the more iconic moments from the original trilogy. Right, they're definitely trying to connect on some kind of subconscious level, if not sort of outright saying like, yeah, we're going to make sure that these are like the first one. Which, I mean, they did plenty of that too, as you mentioned at Star Wars Celebration. Right, there was this party line that basically anytime anyone was asked a question, the first part of their response is, well, it's great to get back to practical effects.
Yeah.
And the Ralph McQuarrie designs, we're going back to those too. Right. Basically everyone, that was everyone's answer to whatever question they were asked. And so that's sort of the overt, explicit way that they're trying to get people to say like, oh no, forget whatever you didn't like about the prequels. We're going back to that stuff you liked before.
Yeah, they're definitely the marketing is. I think that they actually stripped off the episode on the digital release, the digital copies that came out here a couple weeks ago. That the actual not only is the the 20th Century Fox fanfare taken off and substituted, the episode numbers are taken off. I mean, obviously not in the crawl. It's all the same in the crawl, but they're not. They're just like, I think they're trying not to obscure things. Maybe, I don't know. It seems like they're already trying to break. I don't know. Maybe somebody in marketing was kind of like, oh, 7? Do I have to watch 6 other movies to get this?
Right.
That's like the fear of like anybody's like not going to go to a movie theater if they're like, well, if I seen the, it's the whole thing where it's like, people are so lazy if they don't have an opportunity to see if they can't just walk in and be an instant expert, they're not going to do it. And they can't just get, they can't just market these movies to 42-year-old dudes who do podcasts in their basement. They have to they have to think about
just anybody.
I
mean, that clearly is a big part of what they're going for, but it's not just those people.
Yeah, not just, but they have to get the kids. They have to get like kids that want to go and do the Disneyland rides and all that stuff.
Well, I mean, and that's it. I hadn't thought about that, but that's an interesting thing, which is they still have to hook these kids, but it seems like the appeals that they're making. Like, oh, it's just like remember all those emotions you felt when you first saw the original trilogy? Well, they're back.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know that means the same thing to like a 12-year-old kid.
Yeah, it's kind of like
who, I saw this on DVD, just like I saw episode 3 on DVD. And
right, and I watched all 3 of them, and I watched all the movies over a weekend or something like that for the first time.
Right.
Which is, I was thinking about that today because it's like, I mean, I don't think you have to have been there when it came out to actually be a fan. I'm not an a-hole like that, but I wonder what the experience, like the kind of I mean, somebody's walking into that with like, 6 live action movies, 6 seasons of the animated Clone Wars, and then like the whole,
and now 1 season of Rebels,
and books which don't mean anything anymore. Which the whole canon thing, that could be a conversation for another episode.
Yeah, I think we might push that off for the moment.
But it's interesting because it's like the Empire of Dreams documentary, which came with when they finally released the original 3 movies. Bill Moyers said something about when that movie came out in '77, because it was such a major culture, even at 4 years old, I remember what it was like. The whole world that summer was like just obsessed with it. It was like they tried to find a way to shoehorn it into, everything from Donnie and Marie episodes to, that year when you went to the drugstore to buy your Halloween mask, if you couldn't get Darth Vader, they had like 3 facsimiles that looked kind of like Darth Vader.
Right.
And
I don't even know like if the same kind of thing happens today, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously you have like all this officially licensed stuff everywhere already, but it's next to officially licensed whatever from 4 other movies and TV shows right next to it.
Right.
And you're like, oh, of course it's Star Wars and Transformers and G.I. Joe and
Disney's even, I don't know. I don't even know if it's what do they call it when it's like you're almost like you're cannibalizing your own market because they own everything now.
Right.
So that, in some ways, if I'm cynical about corporate interest, is like they kind of have to like it's all of a sudden it's like see a lot of this summer is all about Marvel and they're gonna pump that thing and then it's gonna die off and everything's gonna come out on video around the fall and then they'll be just Star Wars because they own it all. I mean, you're not seeing, it's like there's not a Muppet movie coming out. Not that you could really, the Muppets aren't the same kind of phenomenon, but
The next Muppet movie apparently will be more for adults than for kids, from what I've read.
Really?
Is an odd choice. Yeah, I just saw that headline. It's such an odd choice. Anyway, that wasn't your point.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, that thing, the idea where it's like, I don't know if I like being pandered to this much. It's like there's got to give something. I mean, at the end of the day, no matter how much how many posters and books I read, Star Wars is still for kids. You know what I mean? In my thing, and it appeal, and whether that's the kid in your mind or the actual child. Because I think about it, it's like you had to be that right age. Because I have like a lot of friends that are like 5 or 10 years older than I, and Star Wars to them is the biggest joke. Like they never understood that. They never understood why people liked it so much. They was like, I remember when that came out, and it was like, I was already watching like The Exorcist and stuff, and so by the time Star Wars came out, it just seemed ridiculous. And it's like, because you get older and you get a little more cynical, and it's like I wonder if it's going to be if they can even hope to energize children into being like interested into this or it's going to have a shelf life of 2-3 months.
Right. I mean, obviously having the Disney Channel will help because they'll be able to market the hell out of it there. And they have the Disney apps and everything, so they can find ways to, post short videos. I think they've already started doing this a little bit, post. And they did this for the prequels too, but this was in the late 90s and early 2000s when no one really knew what those were supposed to be, or at least not how they were supposed to be to like get kids interested. Yeah. Post short, like, I don't know, 30-second, a minute behind the scenes videos, or like, oh, this movie's coming out. Let's learn who this character is going to be, so that you're already excited to see this character when they show up on screen for the first time. They've been doing some of that stuff with Rebels, I know.
Okay.
And I could easily see that happening with the films, with the exception, as you mentioned earlier, that J.J. Abrams is such sort of a control freak about stuff.
Right.
I don't know how on board he will be with that kind of marketing plan. Because this, right, to go back to the celebration stuff, right? So I think you and I both watched at least part of, if not all, the episode 7 panel.
Yes,
where they showed the teaser trailer,
right,
and they brought out the stormtroopers, and they're like, "Oh, new stormtrooper uniforms, great!" Which I don't know, that it just. So I'll warn people that this is a Simpsons reference and that you'll probably hear more of them. But right, seeing the like new streamlined stormtrooper uniforms, it was just sort of like Malibu Stacy's new hat to me. Right? It's like, yeah, right, like, okay, right, you changed the stormtrooper uniform a little bit. Great. Like, I don't know why I need to give a standing ovation to like 20 people in a thing that looks slightly different than what it looked like before. But sorry, that aside, I wasn't sure that we actually learned a whole lot of new information there. Yeah. Most of what they revealed, right, the new stormtrooper uniform or like the character names, or the fact that like, oh, this person meets this person and then magic happens, right? Like we kind of already knew that, or at least it was all rumored.
Right. I know that.
I mean, the biggest thing, right? Like I'm just not sure that we learned a lot that's new, or that hadn't already been sort of out there in the ether.
Yeah, and I think I definitely think that's by design. It also made me it really made me feel good in my decision to be an adult and not fly down to Anaheim for this.
Yeah,
because it's like at the end of the day, it was like, no, this was like a 4-day commercial.
Right.
It's like they were trying to sell you everything. It's all video games and books and stuff, and it wasn't really like, oh, hey, we're fans, let's all talk about what's going to happen. It was more like, hey, we're fans, let's talk about where your wallet's going to be for like the next 18 months or the next 5 years.
I mean, it wasn't quite an industry convention, but in the way it was, right? It's a fan convention, but
I wonder if they
focused on the Star Wars industry, and so it was this weird hybrid of like fans getting to talk together about how much they love Star Wars, but in the context of like, oh, hey, let me tell you about this new video game that you can purchase and play.
Yeah.
Or
I wonder if they can write it off as promotional, as a promotion for the movie.
I'm sure they have good accountants there. I mean, the biggest thing that that shocked me, and I think you were with me too, is that just the fact that BB-8, that little rolling droid, is actually either was at the time or is now a practical effect.
Yeah.
Like that it's rolling around, and I mean, it was pretty soon after someone posted a story online, I can't remember where, about how to make your own, and apparently it's basically just magnets. You just put a bunch of magnets and stuff, and then it keeps its balance and it kind of rolls around, and then you can use radio controls to move it how you want.
I wonder how well it actually worked on set, because I mean, I knew that the during the original movies that the robotic R2-D2 was always the bane of it was like the...
Well, and even in the prequels, right? They like, it would fall over or it would run into the wall or, Yeah,
it's kind of, it's interesting. It's like, it's funny because when I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, practical effects, right? And the first thing they show you is a CGI robot, and it's like, I'm not against digital stuff. I mean, sometimes I was watching the originals like a week ago or something in preparation or whatever, and some of the stuff just doesn't hold up, because it's like, we can expand. Even TV shows now if they can expand vistas and things like that. The originals, they do look a little claustrophobic. So I'm like, not like, and obviously that whole crashed stuff and the Millennium Falcon, that's all got to be CGI. Yeah, they're CGI. They're models that are scanned into a computer and then composited together. So I mean, I guess I'm not so anti-CG, although, watching the prequels, it's like...
Well, there's a difference between being against CG and then being against CG that's not done as well. And that's, right, I should say, too, that's probably not the fault of anyone at, like, ILM. No. They were just asked to do a ton of work for probably less money than it should have been. Right, they were basically told, okay... Lucas would walk in there and say, like, all right, I want this thing to happen. Oh. And John Knoll, who, co-invented Photoshop, would kind of stare blankly at this thing going, I have no idea how this is going to happen. And here's my estimate. And okay, I'm only getting 2/3 of that money. So now I have to figure out how to do it for 2/3 of that money.
Yeah.
So and again, sort of late 90s, early 2000s technology, people were still figuring out how to make it look good. But yeah, I mean, and then the other big thing from the second teaser trailer that everyone is sort of talking about is the crashed Super Star Destroyer on this planet in the background. Like, that's clearly not a practical effect. They didn't build a huge Super Star Destroyer.
You think that's a super? You don't think that's just a standard size?
That's what other people were saying. I'm pretty sure it's a Super Star Destroyer.
Okay. I guess you don't see the front. You don't see the front. Do you see the front of it? No, it's the... I don't know. I guess on one side...
It very well might be a normal
The first shot, you see the front, and then at the end, they show the back when the Falcon goes into it. Yeah, so...
As a Star Destroyer of some variety. Then. But, right, like, that's clearly not a practical effect either.
Yeah, Yes.
But that's what everyone is sort of excited about. Well, that and Harrison Ford at the end, but in terms of effect shots, like that is what people are talking about.
You're talking about his hairline.
The second teaser.
His hairline.
What's that?
His effect shot. That hairline of his. It's all of a sudden. Hey, wait a second. He's got.
They had to CG his earring out of the out of the shot.
It's like how did they get his hair just like that? How did they get his hair back to where it was? But
yeah, it's an excellent question.
Chewbacca looks good. I mean, it's kind of like he seems
hasn't aged a day.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how it's like physically he's probably the one in the worst shape. Poor Peter Mayhew. He could barely walk. So it's going to be one of those situations, probably like how like 8 people played Darth Vader. It's like, if he's fighting, it's not David Prowse because David Prowse doesn't know how to do it, and it's like like the way I appreciate the continuity because it's like he is, Peter Mayhew is a pretty classy dude because he's been out there kind of being a voice, what do you call it? A spokesman for those movies, even, through good and bad years. Mm-hmm. And really, he probably
him and Anthony Daniels.
The only money that he ever probably makes is off of selling, his signature at conventions, which can't be that lucrative. Maybe it is. I don't know. I don't know what the prices were. I've seen prices at like Star Trek conventions just out of curiosity. And it can be pretty, pricey. And they had had all of those at that celebration. It's like, That's why.
But it's not the same as, whereas Anthony Daniels can say like, oh, you're making a new movie or you're doing a TV thing or you're doing a radio thing or you just need the voice for C-3PO. Like, I need to make sure that's me. Right. With Mayhew, like, he never said anything. So they could just use whatever audio they want and put someone else in the suit.
That bear and the dog and the.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I don't know. It's interesting. It makes me, and we're not really talking about the other big movie announcement. They'd already kind of the Rogue One.
Yeah,
and I guess they'd already announced
this was the
that.
Other big thing.
Yeah, but they'd already announced it, but they talked a little bit more in depth about it. They did show
and I don't even know. They showed something that I don't even know if you could call it a teaser trailer, since it's basically just a couple of effect shots.
Right. It's like some kind of.
They've only had one actor, or at least that we know of. They've only hired one sort of lead. They haven't started filming yet. So I don't even know if you could call it a teaser trailer, what they showed, or just like, I don't know, concept art. Would that be more accurate?
Yeah, they did. They kept showing kind of a Macquarie-esque, which I think Doug Chang is. He still works for Lucas.
Yeah. He's on board for this.
He's really good at kind of. Well, he's not. There's another dude that I guess is like kind of. He's a Ralph McQuarrie protege or whatever, but I don't know if I don't really know what his involvement in the movies are, if at all, but like Doug Chang, he actually he did all the episode 1, and I think he did all the prequels. I mean, he's a good artist for sure. So he's definitely capable, but I don't know. It's kind of, I'm looking over at the notes here, and it's kind of like some of this stuff that you've the little bits that you collected. Some of this I'd heard on my own, like this, some people have said, oh, this Rogue One is going to be kind of like Saving Private Ryan or like a Zero Dark 30.
So the announcement was that this is going to be a realistic, quote, no holds barred war movie, which, beforehand the rumors were, okay, this is either going to be about, trying to get the Death Star plans, or it's going to be about, the Rogue Squadron from the X-Wings. It sounds like it's going to be the first one, or we know it's going to be the first one. I guess it could be both, but it's at least going to be the first one. And the Gareth Edwards, the director, is like, this is going to be a no holds barred war movie. We're going to show, the shades of gray in the heroes and the villains. And so it's right. Like, is this just making Zero Dark 30 but putting it in Star Wars? Like, is that what the goal of this is?
See, and that's the thing. The minute I heard that, I was like, I don't know how excited I am about these movies. And it's kind of, I don't know. It's like, maybe it's just the way I see Star Wars is that they don't, when you start to apply, a morality to things, I mean, to me, Star Wars is like, why it was so appealing internationally is it's really black and white. It's like
right. Well, it's the Joseph Campbell hero's myth stuff, hero's journey stuff.
And, when you start to address gray areas and things like that, then you start to really open yourself up to the criticisms of things like just militarization and war and stuff. I mean, definitely Star Wars is probably one of the, least, what's the term? Now I'm completely blanking. It's not a metaphor, really. It's kind of like, it's like Tolkien always had this thing where he thought that.
Right. It's a different universe. It's not.
It's not. Don't ascribe your moralities to my thing, because that's not what it is. And Lucas was very much like that. That was like, I'm just dealing with archetypes here. He did. I mean,
I'm just making archetypes and naming them after prominent congressional Republicans. Yeah. That's all.
Well, that's always. Wait, which one was that?
It cuts both ways.
Which one was that?
So in the prequels there was Newt Gunray, of course Newt Gingrich. There was Lott Dodd.
Oh, you're right.
So Trent Lott was a Republican senator. Chris Dodd was a Democratic senator, right? But I mean, there was a lot of sort of.
And there was
he was very angry at
Republicans
at the time about the Iraq War, and they sort of came out in the prequels.
Yeah, I mean, he'd done a lot of lip service that the Emperor that was unnamed in the original movie was like he had thought about, like, and he pretty much stuck to his synopsis of what he said. Oh, this is how the Emperor became the Emperor of the Galaxy, and it was Nixon. So I guess that is kind of like, but it's that kind of thin veneer of like, well, I'm going to name the bad guy after a politician I don't like, which is pretty simplistic.
Right.
I
will say that some of the books have done, I guess, a decent job of some of this kind of, shades of gray. Who's the real, not even like who's the real villain, but there's a book, I want to say Zahn wrote it, called Allegiance. It's not canon anymore. It must be Zahn because Mara Jade's in it. But just sort of, it's multiple perspectives, multiple viewpoint POVs.
Was that the storylines? Stormtroopers on the front of the cover?
Maybe. I mean, I feel like there have to be like 10 books with stormtroopers on the front.
Right.
But,
exactly.
But right, like it's just sort of this idea of allegiance and allegiance to what and to whom, and how it manifests in different ways among both the rebels and the Empire, right? So, and I thought that book was pretty good, and it did a pretty good job of handling that kind of stuff. So there's some room for that sort of thing in Star Wars, I guess. I wonder if the movies are the place for it, because there's also so who's going to take. Well, I was going to say, who's going to take their kid to see a realistic, no-holds-barred war movie in Star Wars? But the answer is probably a lot of people.
Right.
But, like you said, okay, even if you're saying that these movies are for the child in us all, right, does the child in us all, like, how much do they really want to see a realistic, no-holds-barred war movie in the Star Wars universe that talks about how, the villains are just like the heroes and the heroes are sort of like the villains.
Right.
It's kind of like I don't know. But, I think it's probably easier to do that in books when you have, 200-300 pages than to do it in a 100 or so minute movie. But we'll see.
Yeah. It kind of makes me wonder if that maybe what they're planning is that these, the original, the trilogy movies or whatever they call them, that maybe their big thrust on this is that Force Awakens is going to be like, it's going to tickle all the 8-year-old inside your brain and all this stuff, and it's going to be all those characters you remember. But like maybe they're slowly going to kind of phase, they're going to phase that out, and it's going to be when Rian Johnson does his episode 2, and I guess he's writing episode 3, and then there's some rumor that JJ might actually come back to direct
8 and 9. You mean 8 and 9?
Oh, 8 and 9. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. No, I mean I'm pretty sure that episode 7 is the only one that's going to have Hamill and Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford in them. That this movie is, that episode 7 is sort of bridging right? They have to figure out what everyone's been doing since Return of the Jedi, and then sort of hand it off to, John Boyega and Daisy Ridley and Oscar, what's his name? I can't think of his name
Isaac.
now. Yes, thank you.
And it's kind of funny though, because then it's like, if we're trying to get back, if they're trying to get, the idea of like, well, gritty war, it's like, so as far as we've established from what we've seen is like, well, okay, the Empire never went away. They're not called the Empire anymore. They're called the First something. I forget.
Yeah, I'm skipping around here, which I apologize, but right, like going back to the sort of what we learned in the teaser trailers, like I think the biggest differences or the biggest like new information in those trailers is all the design stuff and the fact that, right, okay, you have a slightly different looking stormtrooper uniform, but the sort of iconic classic Empire symbol, Imperial icon logo, whatever is, sort of black, silver, stark white with the stormtroopers, but now it's black and red. And they've changed the sort of, they've changed the icon a little bit, but now you have a lot more black and red stuff. So it's not the Empire anymore, but it's essentially, it's the same folks.
Yeah. Yeah. And so basically we're walking into a movie that's like a group of people that have lived under like 30 years of war, because I mean, as far as like the first Star Wars movie, it seemed like there was, the rebellion was that their first major battle was that, Princess Leia getting those plans or something at the end. They said they'd struck then the trailer or the roll down or whatever. They said, their first winning battle. So it's like the rebellion was relatively new in the first Star Wars movie. So it wasn't like this thing like endless war throughout the galaxy and people like, I'm so tired of all these Star Wars. But
I mean, and now
it's like it's be 30 years of like sectarian violence, and it's like, is this getting to be like a little uncomfortable? Because we live in this world now where it's like, Star Wars came out 2 years after, I guess, the official end of the the Vietnam War, and but really essentially it had left people's minds that we're coming at the end of our wars that have been going feel like have went on even longer than Vietnam, and it's this kind of thing that's like, are we done feeling, if they're going to try to appeal to this kind of child within us thing, are we done with the cynicism yet to do that? I don't know. I mean, I feel like in this time in my life, I feel very cynical about the world. I don't know if I'm quite, if I can 100% like, maybe that's why they're doing with the evoking with the music and the stuff, or maybe that's not even their point. Maybe they can't, there's no way they could possibly achieve that. I mean, even Mark Hamill said in an interview, guys, it's just a movie.
Right.
Maybe.
Sorry. Especially with Rogue One, I sort of go back and forth because I mean, there are definitely parts of it, the idea that I like, right? So this movie will take place sort of right before that opening scene of A New Hope. So it's sort of the events leading up there. And honestly, from the books, that was always sort of my favorite sort of period of time within the Star Wars universe timeline.
Well, they told it a few different ways, right? I mean, the radio dramas have it one way, and then there was video games had that Kyle Katarn character was one of the guys. Like the first level of the Dark Forces game is you stealing the Death Star plans. Right. It's kind of, it's interesting. I mean, it's nice that they're finding a way to kind of solidify it. It is kind of weird that they kept rebooting it every 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, I mean, and even before, so Disney, now that Disney is taking over the Star Wars properties, I don't know if they've rebooted, but they've started up a new series of comic books. And so the Star Wars comic, it's sort of it starts with the throne room scene at the end of A New Hope. And so it's sort of the period in between or I guess right now it's the period right after the events of New Hope. But not long before that, I guess just a couple of years ago, when Dark Horse was still running it, they too sort of were saying, okay, we're going to start over. Right? They put out comic books that were essentially Lucas's first script, where he was called Anakin Starkiller. And it's called The Star Wars. So they did that, and then also they put out a series of the Star Wars comics that were essentially, going back to this period of time, and sort of not necessarily starting over from scratch, but okay, well, we're gonna play around with sort of what's happening here, and show a different storyline of maybe what Princess Leia is up to and all this stuff. But I mean, going back to the books, right? You mentioned earlier the Lando books. I mean, and the 70s, there were a couple of Han Solo books and trilogies, but the 70s one, those books and the Lando books were always sort of my favorite, or among my favorite. Not necessarily because I thought they were like the most well written, although they're pretty good, especially by the standards of like some of the books that came out in like the mid to late 90s, maybe even later. Like they're pretty well written, but like just that idea of, okay, this is, I guess, post Empire, like the Empire has come into being. There's maybe the beginnings of a rebellion, but not really. But it's mostly just about how all these people are living in this universe and trying to make a living. And, Lando's flying around just trying to gamble and stuff. And Han Solo's just trying to earn a living and smuggle stuff to make money. And, like those were always kind of fun to me. And I enjoy sort of thinking about Star Wars in that period of time and in that context. And it's, I mean, eventually, in my opinion, I think the books sort of went either too far in the future or too far backwards for me. Like the stuff that, this takes place 3,000 years before the events of A New Hope. It's like, that doesn't, okay. Like, and maybe this is because history and military history and all that kind of stuff was never really my interest. But okay, so these, the other part that I like about the Rogue One plot is that there's no real involvement of the Jedi or the Force or everything, which again, I think, like I get why that's the part of kind of the broader Star Wars story that Lucas focused on in the prequels. But for me, it was too much about that and not enough about like how everyone else is existing in this universe. I mean, it's and the books.
Finding out that the Jedi came from, the
midichlorian stuff.
Growing up being a kid thinking that like the Jedi were like these kick-ass, cool warriors, to them basically being kind of like dour intergalactic monks.
Right.
That was one of the thousands of missed opportunities in those movies. It's just like, this is less Jedi. Yeah. I'm actually kind of
and in the books too. I mean, they did the same thing, either in the future, like by 300 years after the events of A New Hope, or 2,000 years before the events of The New Hope. Right? It was a lot of those stories. It was just like warring factions of Jedi and the history of the Sith and all this like that. It just never connected with me. I always thought that was just kind of dull, and like I was just reading. I mean, I'm going to say it reminded me of sort of reading about Greek and Norse mythology, but I liked those when I was a kid. So maybe it was just me growing out of those, or just not connecting in the same way. But it's just like, all right, so this god fought that other god, and that's why it rains sometimes. Right? Like,
yeah.
But so the books felt like that to me without the punchline of like, and that's why it rains sometimes. It was just like, okay, this Sith Lord wanted to control the galaxy, but so did that Sith Lord, and so they fought, and neither one of them won.
And that's why every Sith Lord always ends up with like a fucked up face, so they have to wear a mask or something. That's like they always had to make it. They just wanted to keep redoing Star Wars in these kind of.
Yeah.
And that the prequels did that too. It's like they just keep dovetailing everything back in, like,
right. Not everything has to be connected.
Right. and I think that's something that they should really. I don't know. I don't want to get into spoilers, but I've heard some rumors that there is going to be some weird connections back to the original trilogy with some of the characters because of, I saw some casting sheets. There actually might be, you might want to go ahead 30 seconds if you don't want to hear spoil. There might be flashbacks in this movie, which is kind of a weird thing. And I'm like, really? Flashbacks? There's going to be flashbacks at some point in a Star Wars movie? I mean, usually it's a pretty straightforward, like, I think there's only one shot of, like, slow motion in the entire film when Luke's in the cave in Empire. It's like there's not a lot of, like, there's wipes and stuff, but there's not a lot of, like, cinema techniques kind of going on, like, oh, that reminds me of when I knew your father,
Right. I mean, and this is, so moving from what I like about the idea behind Rogue One to what we don't like so much, right? Not everything has to be explained, right? Do we need 100 minutes or more to explain, like, the opening scene from one movie? Or do we need every sort of reference, like you said, of like, oh, I used to know your father? Like, do we need a whole movie just about that? And I'm not sure that we do with everything. Now, I'm sort of a hypocrite because I can think of certain references that I would love to see. And so, everyone has sort of their own pet reference or sort of unexplained thing that they've always imagined about or had questions about. Like, for me, it would be in Jedi when Lando is like, oh, they must have heard about my little maneuver at the Battle of Danab, right? I love Lando. Lando's my favorite character. So, of course, I want to see, like, a whole movie of Lando, like, doing cool stuff.
Yeah.
And, like, winning this battle.
And,
maybe not if it's a realistic, no-hold-barred war movie, but if it's just, like, a fun Lando flying around and outwitting people, like, I would love to see that.
Yeah.
So maybe there are people who are like, oh, I always wanted to see 114 minutes of the rebels trying to find the Death Star plans.
Yeah, young Lando's, like, movie would be pretty cool, I think.
Young Lando would be fun. They brought young Lando, or younger Lando anyway, into Rebels now.
Yeah, I saw that.
Which I thought was okay. It, like, in that episode, he was just kind of camping out at this farm on this kind of distant planet. I was like, well, that's not as fun as I would have imagined, but that's fine.
That's the thing. It's like, I don't want to, like I said, like next episode or whatever, some episode, I really want to get into this expanded universe stuff. But I mean, since they have said Rebels is canon, I don't feel like we're going too far off the farm. But I hate the way they've portrayed him in everything except those early books. The Star Cave of Thromboka and the Flame Wind of Ocean. I forget what the third one was called.
Mind Harp of Sharu.
That's it. I think I might still have those. They might have actually survived the Purge. Because I think I only kept like maybe 10 Star Wars books. But why don't we bracket that for a future let's bracket
episode?
I could go off on how they've portrayed Lando in everything aside from the movies.
Yeah,
how much it irks me.
Yeah. So the other thing that they announced that was sort of news that is one of the things I don't love as much about Rogue One is the fact that Star Wars Anthology : is going to precede every standalone film. I don't know how many is every. Right now, I think we only know of 2. So the official title is going to be Star Wars Anthology: Rogue One, and whatever the next standalone movie is going to be Star Wars Anthology: blah blah blah. And it's such a clunky choice to me. And I understand that they want to like keep the branding and make sure that when people see Rogue One in their newspaper when they look up movies, which tells you how old I am, that I'm still making that reference. When they go online and want to see what movies are playing in their area, and it just says Rogue One, like they want to make sure people know, okay, this is a Star Wars movie, and if you like Star Wars, you should go see it. But I feel like people would know that anyway, like because they're doing enough press about it that people are going to know. Oh, right, Rogue One is the Star Wars movie. But so now we have Star Wars, we have Star Wars Legends with the books, we have Star Wars Anthology with these movies. Like it's a lot. It's a lot of just clunkiness.
I think they're gonna probably find some trouble in that way, because in some way it's like when that movie comes out, people are gonna be so jazzed, and then they're gonna sell a ton of like books, and people are gonna be so mad when they realize it's like, oh, this isn't actually canon. We have these 5 books. Those are all in a comic book and a TV show. But like these other books that we've kept, because I was at Barnes and Noble and I was like thinking like, oh, maybe I'll pick up a Star Wars book. I haven't read one in like, I don't think I've read one since around like 2005. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, well, I get, and like, it was so funny. Like they had them stacked, and some of them were branded with the legends already, and some of them didn't, but they were obviously part of that. So it's like these bookstores still have the old stock because they're
right.
They haven't sold them. So I'm like,
right.
What is this? Which one is this? And then I find out that I know that Tarkin book had come out, and like, oh, that one's not. That is canon.
That is, yeah.
But
I mean I think that's going to hurt them more with like kids maybe than with casual, like adults who are casual fans of the movies who might like, oh, maybe I'll pick up a book and read it. Oh, this contradicts some other thing now. Like, well, whatever. But like for kids who want to get into it now, it's like, okay, so how do you ask this kid who's like super into Star Wars to like invest their time to read 20 or 40 or 50 of these books that then, well, now and then the latest book that comes out, oh, well, that contradicts 4 of those other books that you read a while ago.
I think they're going to find out they're going to be right back in the soup that Lucasfilm was in the 2000s. Like, like they're going to probably end up having to like, it'll be like, oh, well, and then there'll probably be a big push to bring back some. I know Alan Dean Foster is doing the novelization.
Oh, really?
Of Force Awakens. Yeah, it was like that was one of the things that was really disappointing about the coverage of on YouTube for the celebration, that some of that stuff just got completely swept underneath I mean, to me, that the novelization stuff is always important. To read. It's like that's always like. When I go to those movies, it's like the first thing I used to do after I get out of the theater, I'd walk into a bookstore and I'd buy that novelization. Mm-hmm. And like, they're probably actually, if you think about them, the original ones are pretty much the worst, because they're in print and they've been in print for 30, 40 years, and they contradict the movies.
Right.
And it's like it's gotten to be ridiculous. But yeah, and the Rogue One panel did not get televised, which I heard there was some kind of that Gareth Edwards or somebody, they didn't want it televised, and that's why he didn't see it, because I bet you anything he didn't want to do this, and they just kind of said you have to bring.
Well, because again, they haven't even started filming. They have one lead actor cast that we know of. Like, what is there to talk about other than to say, okay, this is going to be a realistic, no holds barred war movie. Here's 30 seconds of concept art. I'm happy to field any questions you have, but my answer is going to be, we can't tell you.
Yeah, I noticed.
Like that's not a panel. So I understand why he might, right? Because that puts a lot of pressure on him. Like, that's not worth his time to go do that. So
right, it's like that's what happened with the Marvel thing, where it's just like, there was like all these defections because people can't take like, I know Joss Whedon sounds like he's pretty much burned out on being on this Marvel thing, and
sure.
Edgar Wright, he left Ant-Man. It's like, I wonder if that's like that. They are kind of building that Marvel universe. They're kind of like, they kind of destroyed the Star Wars universe to rebuild it, kind of based off of that Marvel thing. Although I don't think they're going to do movies where like everybody gets a solo movie and then they all come together for episode 9.
I doubt that's going to happen. It might be interesting depending on how they do it, but right, it's easy to give like Iron Man or Black Widow or whatever their own individual movies. It might be a little harder to give like, oh, here's just this character who you meet. Like, they don't necessarily need their own movie. We'll just make sure they get some screen time in episode 8.
Yeah, I'm wondering if these anthology movies in some way are going to fulfill that, of the kind of like, well, the long-time fans, the old farts. Like, we're going to give you all these movies with all, like, we're going to do an Obi-Wan movie and we're going to do a Han Solo movie. So you're not going to get mad with the fact that,
Right.
there's going to be so little of those. There's going to be little or nothing in the in 8 and 9.
Yeah, I mean, initially people thought the first standalone movie was going to be a Han Solo Boba Fett movie. I'm pretty sure they're not going to make one of those at all.
Right.
But like, they're going to make sure people, keep hope alive, and we're just waiting on that Han Solo Boba Fett movie. It's coming. I know it's coming someday.
Yeah, I know that there has been some talk about that Lawrence Kasdan. Since he had a real personal stake in that character, like he really hated what happened in the prequels, and he was like desperate to come up with some way to retcon it out. So it wouldn't have been, his origin story would have been wrong, even to the point where I heard this on that Rebel Force radio thing, that basically their speculation was that somebody kills off the Tamora Morrison looking Boba Fett and steals the armor and takes it, which doesn't make any sense because he's got the same voice in Empire now.
Right.
But
and
I don't know. It's kind of funny. It's like Star Wars has really become kind of like a comic book in some way, because there's always parts that it seems everything fits a lot less than even it did 10 years ago, and they're desperate well, we're going to throw that out and we're going to bring this in, and it's like sometimes the solutions aren't necessarily as good as the ones they had 15 years ago, but I don't know, it's going to be interesting. Did you want to talk about this lightsaber design thing?
Nah, we can skip that for now. What I would like to do, now that the transition is less smooth than it would have been. But right, so we've been talking about Rogue One. We've been talking about the fact that it's now officially Star Wars Anthology : Rogue One, and that basically we're going to have a movie to explain a scene, maybe even a line from one of the original trilogy movies. So we were thinking, if we were going to create our own Star Wars anthology movies based on a scene or a line from one of the original trilogy movies, what would that be? And so we've come up with some hopefully future Star Wars anthology movies here. I hope that Kathleen Kennedy is listening. So Robert, why don't you take it away?
Oh, I'm glad you said. I forgot to print it out, so I just found it on my phone. Okay, so this is my pitch. I guess we could call this segment Pitch Meeting, and this is our first episode of Pitch Meeting. So here's my
energy up. It's a pitch meeting. Let's go.
Here's my Star Wars anthology : Star Wars anthology: Wanted Men. It's Ponda Baba, picture him, Walrus Man. For us old dudes, that's what they call him. You remember him. And Dr. Evazan. And he was that guy. He was the guy in the cantina with the fucked up nose.
Sure. I don't like you.
Yes. They start.
He doesn't like you either.
Yeah. Well, watch yourself. We're wanted men. We have the death sentence on 12 systems.
Right. Everyone loves this character.
Okay, so they're starring in their own standalone movie. It's a Magic Mike-esque tale of a man struggling to pay off medical school debt while financing a fledgling medical practice focused on restoring amputated limbs. Facing the imminent wrath of Jabba the Hutt for the unpaid debt, Dr. Evazan and Ponda Baba travel to different systems to raise money as exotic dancers. Things start out simply enough until Ponda Baba accidentally steps on the pet of one of the clients, crushing its spine during a dance. Turns out, quote, petricide is a capital offense on the planet, leaving Evazan and Baba no choice but to flee before the authorities arrest them. They travel to 10 additional systems, always seeming to run afoul of local laws, leaving them with 11 death sentences when they arrive on Tatooine for a bachelor party in the small town of Anchorhead, which Anchorhead I don't think is actually in the original movie. It's in the deleted scenes. It's where Tashi Station's at.
Yeah.
They're a group.
I can take you as far as Anchorhead or wherever it is you're trying to go.
Oh, you must do what you feel right, of course. There is a group of inebriated farm boys, which were all played by Luke's friends that were deleted from the original cut of Star Wars. But you can find the deleted scenes. They're there. They beat and taunt Evazan and Baba, leaving them no choice to retaliate. They beat their attacker so badly, they assume they're all dead. Realizing they now have the death sentence on 12 systems, they travel to Mos Eisley to find transport off the planet. In the cantina, the final scene is Ponda Baba seeing Luke dressed just like his assailants and becoming enraged. So that would be my take of
I love it. I'm going to greenlight that. I look forward to seeing that in, I think, 2019 we can manage.
Yes,
I think so.
2019.
Great. So for my future Star Wars anthology, I bring you Star Wars Anthology : Tabanaskatsi. This is a visual tone poem about modern-day society's connection to nature in 3 parts.
Tabanaskatsi.
Chapter 1, Dawn, opens on an abstract melange of colors. The camera slowly pulls out to reveal it as the gas giant Talaran. Time-lapse photography shows the planet rotating over several cycles. The film pushes back in and fades into a flow of liquid Tabana gas. The camera traces the flow as it travels along a pipe. We hear several Ugnaught voices over the soundtrack as the image fades to white. Chapter 2, Day, begins with a series of shots of starships leaving and entering hyperspace. The next sequence cuts back and forth between shots of newly manufactured blasters on a conveyor belt, archive footage from the Clone Wars, and shots of humans and other species trying to control a series of Tabana gas fires on Rendili. The roar of the flames begins to overwhelm the soundtrack regardless of what is shown on screen, before it abruptly stops and the camera cuts to the exterior of Bespin's Cloud City. We see time-lapse cinematography of cargo ships leaving with Tabana gas shipments and returning to reload. The time-lapse nature of the sequence ends, and the final shot of this section follows a single cargo ship, beginning at the right of the frame and moving left, as it leaves Cloud City and enters hyperspace. Chapter 3, Dark, begins with multiple time-lapse shots of city life, particularly beings of multiple species walking through Cloud City's corridors. Their movement speeds up until most beings become a blur. Several Ugnaughts move through the frame right to left at normal speed until they come upon a door. The camera follows the Ugnaughts as they enter a carbon freezing chamber, where Tabana gas is prepared for shipment. The Ugnaughts carefully check the carbonite blocks to ensure the gas is secured for travel. Even though the Ugnaughts move at normal speed, in contrast to the artificially fast motion of the corridor outside, their movements seem painstaking. Carbon vapor gradually fills the chamber in which the Ugnaughts work. The final shot traces rising wisps of Tabana gas down from Cloud City to their origin on Bespin. Tabanaskatsi.
Now, if you could find a way to get one of these Ugnaughts to have a pair of big tits, you get your funding.
It's doable.
It's doable.
Doable.
You're coming out 2020. You're coming out after my movie.
Excellent.
Now, see how much fun that is? This is where you, the listener, and I hope you're still there, listeners. Thank you for listening to us. You can send us. The old emails are still open at I think it's talkingbirdcast@gmail.com. We're also at talkingbirdcast on Twitter, and you can. I don't think there's an easy way to send your idea on Twitter. It's pretty. You only get 140 characters, so you can probably email us, or I don't know. You know how to do it.
But send us an email. Send us your pitch, your future Star Wars anthology pitch. We want to hear those ideas, and maybe we'll even greenlight a couple, and we can take them to Disney and to Lucasfilm, and maybe get some of them made.
Exactly. On that, I think we've run its course for today. I think we should.
Yeah,
we got
a
lot of stuff for next episode, which I don't know exactly what we're going to talk about, but we're probably going to talk about Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
Anyway,
we're going to talk about Star Wars.
Thank you for joining us on episode 1 of Talking Bird, the special edition.
Thank you for joining us.
Do we not even say our names? I don't think we.
I'm pretty sure we did not.
I don't think we said. So I have been Robert Zachary.
I remain John Llewellyn.
And thanks for listening. And may the Force be with you.
our Piccini foam, a toot de horn.